Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interview Carrie Kerskie. Carrie is the CEO at Kerskie Group LLC. She's an author of Protect Your Identity and also Your Public Identity because nothing is a private anymore. She's an identity theft and cybersecurity culture speaker. She's a thought leader, and she's a host of Privacy Mentor podcast. Carrie shared insights on both types of identity theft for both business and personal and impact on our organization. She also provided clarity on privacy issues versus identity theft issues. We talked about a variety of different topics, but I think you're really going to enjoy my discussion with her that when she talks about what can business leaders do to protect themselves, their companies, and also their staff as well. And what can staff do and to also help their organization to protect themselves from identity thefts or privacy issues. We talks about compliance, and she also talks about what is the best course of action when it comes to sharing information and educating each other. It's a collaborative effort to deal with all those identity theft issues. If you like this content, as always, don't forget to send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Carrie Kerskie. Carrie, the area you specialize in is so much needed these days, especially with the identity theft and so much of privacy issues. I'm looking forward to learning from you. Thank you so much for time. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
So, especially with the pandemic, a lot of business leaders, business owners who struggle with this, on a personal side or on a business side, where you see the biggest, business owners, where do they get the most challenge on, and what are the main issues they up against when it comes to identity theft or privacy?
Yeah, so it's really the big thing that I've seen, and I've been working with identity theft, fraud, and cyber threat victims for more than 15 years. And whenever we're working with a victim, we always like to try and reverse engineer to figure out what made them become a victim. And is there something we could put in place to protect other people so it doesn't happen to them? And really the big pattern that I've been seeing, and it definitely has increased with the pandemic, is our lack of what I like to call our CQ, or our cyber intelligence. And basically, that is our knowledge and understanding of how technology works, and also what we know and what we don't know, and also what our beliefs are around technology. And these are things that, I know a lot of times in business where there's focus on the tech side, which you absolutely need to have tech to fight tech, but then addressing the human side. And quite often they're using tech to address the human side as well. And that's through, phishing campaigns and through, these email testing and compliance or online training programs. But they don't really get to the root of the problem. And that's addressing the person's individual beliefs or thoughts around the technology. So until you change those, people are going to still keep doing the same habits and responding to these threats the way that they've always done it, based on what they think is right, but might not always be right. So it's really an interesting thing we've seen that, and of course the pandemic has just made it worse because everyone was forced to embrace technology even more. So that's one of the big things that we're seeing, is that we still need to focus on that human side, but not so much as the awareness, but it's getting to the root of what their cognitive beliefs are, or also called their cyber bias. And that's what's causing them to respond the way that they do.
That is so true that, I've seen very often that people using technology for every single solution, but most of the, issues are with the human errors or just lack of information or negligence, right? So, but focus is so much on the technology that technology can fix all the issues. Yeah, it's a tool, but it's not going to fix all your training issues or all your human side of behavior issues.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to open those lines of communication. And the other thing I see too, which I just find is fascinating, is that when they're doing training and teaching on the business side, it's always in the business environment. But technology is technology. I mean, we all have smartphones. We're carrying these things around in our pocket. It's not like we're carrying two different ones. Most people aren't. Some people do. Most people aren't. So when you're sending emails, when you're texting, when you're calling, it's on the exact same technology, whether it's at work or at home. So why are we so focused on teaching everything in the business environment? Let's think about what people really want to know. Let's boil it down, because if you would put an actual honest survey out there asking how many employees, how many of them they're really passionate about protecting the company,
Yeah.
it's going to be a low number.
Yeah.
But ask them what they're passionate about, and it's protecting themselves. So if you teach your people how to protect themselves, something they want to learn how to do, they then develop those habits and they overcome their cyber bias. And those habits then get carried back into the workplace. So it really is a win-win. So I think we need to stop, siloing, this is what you do at work, this is what you do at home, because technology is technology, doesn't matter where you use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the area I see, Kerry, is there's confusion. There's lines a little bit blurry between privacy and identity theft. Privacy, yeah, you want to protect your privacy, but it's not as well, it's critical, but it's not as critical as identity theft, right? So that could really jeopardize your identity and put you in trouble, right? So if you can walk us through, where does the line gets a little bit blurry between that? A lot of people think it's identity theft, but it's a privacy issues actually, right? In Canada, we are big on privacy, so especially on a privacy, it's not a simple privacy. Sometimes it's identity theft, right? So there's some sort of lines blurries between those two.
Yes, definitely. And it used to be in the past that, identity theft, fraud, cyber threats, those were siloed. They were separate. It's all merged together today. It takes one to cause the other. And the same thing with privacy, because a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, I don't care about the fact that they're, seeing what I'm searching online because I have nothing to hide. But you need to look at the bigger picture. So with a lot of these companies that are harvesting this information, and we're not just talking about, like the basics, name, address, date of birth, social, those sorts of things. We're talking about your likes, your interests. What are your hobbies? Where do you go? Who do you hang out with? What do you look for? What do you buy? All this is being harvested and sold and resold and put into databases. So if you look then on the identity theft side, and then also getting, with some of where the privacy is causing, or lack of privacy is leading to more identity theft, think about security question answers. That's another layer of protection before getting into an online account. Well, now, when people say, well, what's your favorite food? Most people are thinking, oh, nobody's going to be able to know that. Only I know that. Yeah. Well, if there's an app and it's tracking everywhere you go and it sees you go to the same restaurant every single time, there's a pretty good chance they're going to figure out what your favorite food is. Yeah. So this is where people need to think outside the technology and not just think of, oh, that's over here or this is over here. Same thing being on social media. For some reason, people seem to think it's their own private chat space between they and their circle of friends. Yeah. But it's no equivalent, or it is the equivalent of when you're putting something on social media. It's like putting it on a billboard on the side of the highway. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. There is no privacy around there, and people, they don't really think about that. So when you're presented with these surveys, these polls, these quizzes, and what type of search engine should you use, or what web browser should you use? And you might think on the surface, well, it doesn't really matter if I get targeted ads or general ads. But when you look at big picture and what's being done with all of that data that's being harvested and sold and shared, then you really start adopting this privacy mindset. Because otherwise, technology's made us all, pretty lazy. I mean, we want convenience. It's like, is there an app for that? How many times have we heard that? I don't want to do this. Find me an app. Yeah. Well, that has caused us to lose our critical thinking skills. So we don't know how to respond properly because we don't understand how this stuff works. And it's also created this convenience mindset. We're looking for the easiest way out. We're looking to outsource things to other people. The more you outsource, the more convenience you have, the less privacy you have. So just imagine it as a scale. The more you have of one, the less of the other. So start thinking in terms of, well, if I do this, how can it be used against me? Or what would happen if that information fell into the wrong hands? How could they use that to, steal my identity, or to get access to my accounts, or to do whatever it is that they want to do? So people really need to think outside of the app or the technology that they're using.
Yeah, either the apps or websites. We're talking about convenience. Before when we install an app, we already signing the agreement with the company that and jeopardizing all of our security anyway. So nobody reads those agreements. Nobody's gonna go through here before I download Facebook. Let me see the agreement, right? But they have everything outlined in that agreement that your privacy is not it's not protected as you think it's protected. So it's just a false impression for us to go online and just think that everything is private. But you already signed the agreement by the downloading a free app. That's a fair exchange between for convenience and using that app all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always like to strip things down to make it very simple, very easy to remember. So one of the things that people need to do, and again with technology, it's like everything has to be instant. Nobody wants to stop and take time to validate or eliminate or double check things. So we call it take a privacy pause.
Okay.
Just take a few minutes. And if there's that app you really want to use, we're not saying you have to read line for line and word for word every bit of the privacy policy. So do a quick scan and look for what do we collect and how do we use it. At least that'll give you a general idea. It's a high level, not getting in the nitty gritty, but it's a high level that might give you an inclination of if you want to proceed with that or not. But people they're like, I don't want to have to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to take the time. I don't want to adjust my privacy settings. It's too much time. I don't want to have to deal with it. You're gonna have to deal with it, because if you don't take the time to deal with it on the front end, you're going to have to deal with it on the back end when you have an issue such as identity theft, fraud, or a cyber threat. And that's going to take you a heck of a lot of more time, and it's going to be probably cost you money out of pocket to get the problem resolved, or you might even lose money. So take that privacy pause up front, because you don't want to have to take that time in the end when things go south.
Yeah, definitely. It gets a little bit, especially when you're installing something on a phone, right? You install an app on a phone, they have access to everything on your phone, right? So, if you don't pay attention to that, they could have access to your contact, your text messages. There's so many different ways they can access the information on your phone, right?
Right.
No.
Yep. Absolutely. And there are tons of websites out there that you can use that will help you. There's one for my podcast. We just did an interview, and it's privacy not included. It's the foundation part of Mozilla, which does Firefox, and they actually review terms of service, and they will look at all these IoT or the smart technology, and they give them a rating as to which ones are better for privacy and which ones aren't. So that's something that you can use if you want to try to save time. We have a website that is not officially launched yet, but it's Privacy-Mentor, because the podcast is Privacy Mentor Podcast. And again, the whole purpose of it is we understand people aren't going to take the time to do it. And if you do, you still might not be able to figure out what's what, because they use all the legal jargon and they make everything so confusing. So look for resources that you can know and trust, and they can kind of give you the abbreviated, highlighted version. And then that way you can make an informed decision, as opposed to, going in and doing it, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
And very interesting. So, let's talk about identity theft. That's a much bigger topic, I think, for business as well and for individuals as well. You mentioned 6 different type of a business, identity thefts in your book. Is that a 6 or 7, Kerry? You mentioned that. I forgot the number.
Yeah, but there's multiple ways that you can break it down. And if you ask different people, they might have different definitions. And now with more technology being involved, there's probably even more. But the way that it's traditionally broken down is you have financial identity theft with that. That involves, bank accounts, anything money-wise, credit accounts. Then you can also have government documents and benefits. So those would be things like we saw here in the U.S., a lot of unemployment fraud, PPP, EIDL. Those were all, loans to keep small businesses afloat during the pandemic, and driver's license, social security cards, IRS tax returns. And then you have criminal identity theft. Criminal identity theft is when someone commits a crime, or it can even be something like a traffic violation, but the identity they present to law enforcement is yours. So now that speeding ticket is on your driving record as opposed to the imposter's driving record. There was one gentleman years ago, he left his wallet on a gas pump and drove away. And it turns out, long story short, that they mass produced his driver's license, because law enforcement, they called him in and they said, hey, we've recovered your wallet. And he's like, okay, great. He walks in and they're questioning him. They're, asking him all these things. And he's like, wow, this is a lot for me to, just pick up my wallet. Well, it turns out what happened is someone who bought a duplicate version of his driver's license, they had actually killed 3 people. So there was a warrant for this man's arrest for the murder of 3 people, because that was the identity. Granted, it wasn't presented to law enforcement, but in the course of their investigation, everybody said, oh yeah, that's, we'll call him Tom Smith. Well, it wasn't Tom Smith. Tom Smith was the victim who lost his driver's license. So that's the criminal aspect. Then you have medical identity theft. And medical identity theft, this is the deadliest form of identity theft. Because you think about it, when you go to the doctor or, hospital or whatever the case might be, all of your symptoms, all of your test results, all of your medications you're taking, that all goes into your permanent medical record. Now, when a doctor is looking to make a diagnosis, they're looking at your symptoms, your test results, everything else. But it's not just for that one day that you're there. They're going back and looking before to see what has changed, if there was something different, if there's an anomaly. Well, if I have used your identity for medical services, well, now my test results, my symptoms is now commingled with your medical record. And there's been numerous documented cases where this has led to misdiagnosis. And there's been other times where one gentleman, when there was an economic downturn, he lost his job, didn't have insurance. So his brother said, well, just use my health insurance because I'm not using it. My company's paying for it. Just go ahead and pretend that you're me when you go to the doctor. Well, the gentleman, when the doctor did the exam, because he knew he had an underlying heart condition. And when they checked him, they're like, we're putting you into surgery immediately because he was minutes away from having a massive heart attack. He ended up dying on the operating table because the doctors were basing the entire surgery procedure and everything they were doing based on his brother's medical history. So the doctors were flying blind because they had no idea the actual person on the table, what his medical history was, and it resulted in him dying. There's been cases, people getting a prescription for a medication that has a negative interaction with something else they're taking, and they end up becoming very sick or dying. So medical identity theft is extremely dangerous. And then finally, there's business identity theft, because businesses have identities. You have, your tax ID number. You also have your intellectual property, which is, your trademarks, your brand, all that stuff. And also your goodwill, your reputation, and what customers think of you. Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. So businesses themselves can become victims of identity theft. We've worked with many of them over the years. One of them, the imposter was able to get a hold of his merchant processing account, which is where they processed. They did a lot of business online. And we're talking large dollar ticket amounts online for large pieces of equipment. And the imposter was able to get a hold of their merchant processor and told them, hey, I've changed my bank account. So any deposits put into this new bank account. And then the imposter, because they were sitting on a bunch of stolen credit cards that they had in their possession, they started making fraudulent transactions. So it led to the business itself having hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of credit card chargebacks. Wow. So this is a huge, huge problem that most people don't even think about. And a lot of the laws, especially here in the United States, identity theft laws typically only refer to individuals, consumers, not businesses. So some of the rights that individuals have, and individuals can recover much faster from identity theft than businesses can. And it's just because of the definition in the laws, where it mainly talks about the consumer side. So that's kind of a general way of breaking them down, the types of identity theft. And like I said, there's so many more out there, because now, you have new account fraud, which is when someone applies for a new credit account using your identity. Well, that's lumped under financial. Then you have account takeover. That's where they're trying to take over your current bank account or investment account. Again, that would be listed under financial. So there are a lot of subcategories within it, but usually we kind of break it down in those big ones.
Oh, that's very dangerous. You can, whether it's a business threat, Kerry, or as a personal, you can, recover some of the stuff later on, but the damage is so big at that point that is done to either business on a personal level, that you may be able to recover a little bit here and there, but the damage is just so big that it could destroy lives, it could destroy livelihoods for people in a business, or it could destroy brands or businesses, at that moment that that threat happens. And I think one of the reasons I love your book, by the way, one of the thing I like about your book is you also walk us through, how is this threats carried out, and what kind of impact they could have on many different areas, right? So financial impact, financial side of things, you walk us through. Well, listen, it could be credit card, it could be checks written, and what kind of damage we could have. These techniques, though, Kerry, those changes over time, right? Whether it's a business, whether it's personal, the bad guys are always changing their techniques, right? And the business leaders need to stay on top of these techniques somehow, right?
Yes, absolutely. And with the techniques, again, because of the pandemic and everything being forced to online and working from home, and there are a lot of changes that happened pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
It's created the perfect storm, created the perfect opportunity for these identity thieves. As far as the methods that they're using, now we're seeing more wire transfer scams. And the difference with if somebody gets a hold of your bank account or your debit card or your credit card, there are laws in place that minimize your liability and protect you, and you can get that money back. So most of the time, that type of identity theft, people don't suffer an out-of-pocket loss. They're made whole. Everything's fine. Okay. But when you're dealing with this wire transfer or ACH transfers, it's instant moving of the money. Where if it's a check or debit cards, there's usually a lag time between there. They can recover funds. But when you're dealing with the wire transfers, you have 24 to 48 hours maximum to identify it and report it to the financial institution for them to stop it, to be able to get the money back. And the reason being is because as soon as you release that wire, it goes to the other bank, the other party's bank, and then they release it to their customer. Not knowing that, this is a scam. So the reason why that 24, 48 hours is that sometimes when it goes to the other side, it'll be in that account. And sometimes the bank will have a hold for 24 hours before they release the funds just to make sure. But yeah, we've seen people where they finally realized that there was an issue, and it was, 6-7 days later, and the money was gone. And we're talking well north of six figures that they lost, and they're not going to be able to get back because the money was already gone. So that's one thing, especially with businesses, because you get a lot of the fake invoices, the business email compromise, where you get an email that looks like it's an internal one, or from a vendor. That's another one that we see. So there are a lot of things that are going on that businesses need to be aware of with that. The other thing is on the customer side too, is that for some reason, there's this disconnect between the business and the customer as far as these fraud prevention tools. Businesses will roll out new fraud prevention, but they don't explain it to the customers or let them know. So then when a customer is calling and they're asked extra questions, they're like, wait a minute, are you the bad guys? Or you've never asked me that before, that sort of thing. But on the flip side of that, if the bank would come out and say, here's our new procedures, well, now the bad guys know what procedures they have to overcome. So you have to find that happy medium between how to keep your customers informed where they feel safe and secure, but without tipping off the bad guys. And the other thing too is we see, again, with working with victims for so many years, because we're on the phone calls with the victims when we're calling these companies. And we always say that victims are victimized twice. First by the identity thieves, then the second time by the companies where the transaction took place. And, a bad guy can make one phone call, take over an account and do whatever they want to do. A victim, it's like 5 or 10 phone calls, sending documentation, filling out forms. So there's a huge problem there. That we have to find that. And I understand the businesses are trying to determine, because you don't want people getting out of paying their bills by pretending to be an identity theft victim. I understand that part of it. But I think if we do more conversations with the customers, and asking them before we start rolling anything out. Another thing that drives me crazy is when I would see the banks and credit card companies, and they're like, oh, we have fraud protection on your account. Well, what you're telling the customer is, oh, I don't have to look at anything or worry about it because you've got my back. No, it's a partnership. What they should be saying is, we're going to do our best from what we can on our side, but we need you to also look on your side too. So if you see something, you let us know. We'll both work together to get it corrected. That's the message that should be sent out there, as opposed to oh yeah, we've got the best fraud protection. Come to move all your money here. Well, when there's a problem, what do you think the customer is going to do?
Well,
bye-bye.
Same as insurance company doing a cyber insurance, right? We get you covered. You cover with a cyber insurance. That doesn't mean you go do whatever you got to do, right? You still got to protect yourself, right? It's the same kind of concept.
Exactly. Yeah, you need to have this open communication. And also, like I said, get feedback from your customers. I know for myself, when I'm going online and I'm doing something and I look at it, I'm like, oh, wait, this was way too easy for me to get into. Well, if it's easy for me, I know it's going to be easy for the bad guys. Or if I found, for example, with one of the credit bureaus here, we were helping a customer do something, and we were locked out on one side and not even trying to find a back door. We said, okay, well, let's try this a different way. Well, we ended up finding a back door that let us get into the account that an imposter had set up using the victim's identity. So actually, we hacked the hacker's account. Wow. and it was, we weren't even hacking anything. It was just that the way their systems were designed. Yeah. Exactly. And so when we reported it to them, they're like, oh, no, that doesn't happen. It's like, well, we just did it.
Yeah. So, it looks like not only you have to educate your staff, it looks like you got to educate your vendors, you got to educate your customers, everybody you do business with in a business world. You got to educate everybody around, around your business, to bring everybody on the same page and say, listen, this is how we're dealing with it. Do you have a control on a business? Like, how do business leaders go about it? Do they, customers, they cannot say much. I think they can recommend some stuff. They can definitely present some guidelines. But vendors the same way. You don't have a control on this entity, but you still got to educate these people around you. So how do business leaders go about it?
Yeah, so obviously it has to start at the top within a business, because if you're preaching, do this, but the leadership's not doing it, then it's never going to work. So obviously it has to start at the top, and then you get buy-in within your own environment, with the team, with everybody from all the way top to the bottom and in between. You have to get create an environment where people can discuss and be like, hey, you know what, I think that there might be a better way to do this, or I think this could end up causing us a problem down the road, because people have different perspectives, different views, different cyber biases that make them respond the way they do. So have that conversation internally. And then when it comes to customers, also put it out and step into the role of your customer and pretend to be them, or have, a focus group of your customers that you could say, hey, we're thinking about, doing this. Here's the reason why we're doing it. Would you be willing to test it out with us and give us your honest feedback on it? So that's one way you can do it, kind of in a little bit of a controlled environment. Also make it available where you have either something on your website, because I know that most businesses, however, you can report if there's a phishing email, and you can report it to them. Usually it's abuse at whatever, or that kind of thing. Yeah. Have a separate thing on there for, suggestions or improving service, or what are some things that, you think would protect us better, because there could be people outside of your own circle that have a better way of doing it that might be more effective and cost less, So I think we need to have these, but it's also, as your organization see things, or the industry sees things, push it out to everybody and just say, hey, watch out, here's something that's happening, and here's what we're doing to try to protect you, but we can't do it all by ourselves. So if you see something, let us know.
But as you mentioned, it starts from the top. Many business leaders, my colleagues as well, when it comes to technology, it's too complicated. I don't want to get involved in that stuff, right? So especially with that, they have to learn something, they usually can, stay away. Let me find somebody who can handle it and not getting involved in that stuff. What would you recommend? Do they have an option in this day and age still just, delegate this to somebody else in a company to run with it, or they have to get involved in this? If they're not getting involved in the, especially with the technology and privacy and protection, or with the training people, how could they expect people to run with it? People they can hire to run this for them. I see a lot of hesitation from business leaders that, it's just too complicated, overwhelming. I don't want to get involved in this stuff.
Yes, and that is a big problem, because the leaders are the ones who are making the final decisions, and they're making uninformed decisions because of it. And there was one company that it was an industry that we worked with, and the industry itself got taken down by ransomware. And what happened is there was a software vendor that majority of the industry used to run their back office. Okay. Well, that software vendor got hit with ransomware. So then it passed around to everybody in the industry. And within 24 hours, more than half of this industry was, brought to shut down. Like nobody could do anything, because all the back operations were shut down.
That was 2021, right? That last year was, I think it was last year.
No, this was actually in towards the end of 2019.
Okay.
This was towards the end of 2019, and it's the ransomware. Everything's just gotten exponentially worse since then. Okay. But during this time, and so we hopped on a joint phone call, conference call, because nobody was doing a lot of Zoom then quite yet.
Yeah.
And on this call, it was from a lot of the leaders from the industry, the association, leadership and everything, because they were all trying to figure out how could we stop this from happening again in the future. And I remember one of the CEO from one of the largest companies in the particular industry, he made the comment, he said, I have spent $250,000 on my infrastructure to protect us, for cybersecurity. How did this happen? And I said, it wasn't inside your network. It was the third party. It was outside. And he goes, how come no one ever told us about that? How come we were never warned about that? So as a leader, it is your job to understand. I'm not saying you have to go out and learn how to be a coder or a hacker or do pen testing or any
but
technical stuff.
But
you have to have at least a baseline knowledge of it. And we need to get away from this whole cybersecurity culture that's out there right now of nobody wants to admit what they don't know because they don't want to be embarrassed. Yeah. Get over it. Say, look, I don't understand this. Break it down for me very simple. What is it? How could it impact us? And what can we do to protect ourselves? Or, what is it? How will it benefit our company? And what are some things that could go wrong if we end up doing this decision? Because you always have to look at the risks and the rewards when you're making decisions. But if you don't even understand how it works, then you're never going to be able to figure out the difference between the risk and the rewards and make an informed decision. So yes, leadership has to get involved. They have to take the time. It's not, I'm in finance, that's not my department, or I'm in sales, that doesn't apply to me. Yeah. Well, that just goes back to, again, that cyber bias. I don't understand it. I'm going to find somebody else who does and let them run with it. Yeah. Yeah. That's going to cause problems. You've got to take the time to at least understand the basics. And that way, what questions to ask. And before you, hand it off to or delegate it to somebody else, you can say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what I think this program will do. Let me know if it does. And if it does, let's look at, play a devil's advocate or play worst case scenario. If something goes wrong, what are the negative implications? But you have to understand at least what it's doing on a base level before you can do any of that.
Yeah, I never understood the logic. Business leaders or CEO of the company, they work so hard to build the companies. They grow a company, they're trying to scale a business. And just because they're not getting involved with some other stuff, and one stupid risk has to happen, one bad guy has to get into your system, and you lose a profit margin for a whole year. You lose all your profit that you worked so hard to gain for over the year, right? So it doesn't make sense that if you're in a business of scaling your company, trying to make money, then why wouldn't you get involved in this and understand what is impact your business so much that is these are the risks that you have to manage, I guess, right?
Yeah, especially if your whole business depends on that platform.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like building a house on a layer of quicksand because you didn't want to check underneath to see if it was solid ground. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to put everything into this platform, or if this is going to be a core component of your business, you better do your homework and know that inside and out. And you can't just depend on tech people to do it for you. Yeah. You have to understand it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to address these issues. Because when push comes to shove, if something goes wrong, the customers aren't going to go to your tech people. They're going to come to you. Yeah. You're the one that's going to be held accountable. So you need to understand. And you can't say, oh, well, I didn't understand it. Okay. No.
So one is protecting business, Kerry. How about protecting the staff as well? When you have a teams working for you, big companies have a staff working for you. Not only you got to protect the business, but you also got to protect your staff as well. They could be, a victim of identity theft working inside the business as well. They're using business email. They still could lose identity through that. So right. That is the education is critical for that. But also you got to protect. You have a responsibility to protect your staff as well in a business environment, right?
Right, exactly, definitely, because you don't want to be the one why all your staff now has an issue. There was one organization. I obviously I'm not going to be naming any names of anything, but the nature of the let's just say that being in the industry that they were in, it was the last organization that I thought would have this issue. But it happened. And what happened is the organization was going through a potential buyout or merger. I forget which one it was. And this was years ago. And it goes back to, remember the emails where they would be from the CEO saying, send me all the W-2s on the employees, with all the tax documents and everything. And the person who worked under the CEO, she got this email, but he was in the meeting with a prospective buyer at the time. So she thought he wanted it for that meeting, and she sent it out. So what happened is, after the tax information on all the employees, we're talking over 100 people, was sent to the criminals, the criminals then started filing fraudulent tax returns. So we were brought in and we spent, weeks with them, working with all the employees about, okay, here's the forms you need to fill out. Some of them had already gotten notification there was a fake tax return filed. Other ones hadn't received it yet, but eventually did. And then they had to, because now it's their name, address, date of birth, and social that was exposed. So then we had to help them put other things in place to protect themselves. So when it goes back to the awareness training and developing that baseline understanding or boosting your cyber intelligence, your CQ, that also involves with identity theft. And like I said before, if you're teaching everything from the business environment, then when people go home, they're still going to do what they're going to do. And they want to protect themselves. They want to protect their families. So as a business, instead of just paying for like an identity theft protection service, that doesn't change anybody's habits. It doesn't protect anybody from identity theft. It may or may not help afterwards, depending on how much you paid for that plan. You'd be better off paying for the after, what to do afterwards, a disaster plan. You'd be better off paying for a way to teach all of your employees or give them access to all the steps of things that they can put in place that would greatly minimize their risk of becoming a victim. Because when we work with people, our goal is to make their identity so difficult to use that the bad guys move on to easier targets. So as an employer, if you could give that to your people and also you yourselves, because if leadership's a hit with identity theft, that could have a direct impact on the company as well, especially if it's the owner and now they have horrible credit because of identity theft, that's going to impact the business's ability to be able to get credit. So from the top down, everywhere in between, if you would give that knowledge and give them the tools, the steps of here's what you need to do, put this in place, it's going to minimize it, and follow that up with helping people overcome their cyber bias and develop that baseline knowledge around how technology works, then when they're faced with a threat, whether it's personal or business, they're going to be able to respond the right way because they know better. And really, we simplified it, made it really easy. So there are two big principles that we train. One of it is the privacy versus convenience mindset. So obviously someone with the convenience mindset, they're going to have short reused passwords. They're not going to use two-factor authentication. They're going to use free public Wi-Fi. These are all the bad habits that someone of convenience mindset would use. So if you switch to that privacy mindset, you're going to have longer passwords. You're going to store them in a secure location. You're going to, use multi-factor authentication. The more the better. If it takes me 10 steps to get into an account, it's going to take a bad guy 10 steps to get into the account. Same with one step, that sort of thing. So that shifting from that convenience mindset to the privacy mindset, because we see in businesses too, even though they have policies put in place where you have to use two-factor authentication, employees will not do it because it interferes with productivity. So allow them to have the time to follow those security measures and knowing that it might have a slight impact on your productivity. But you can't keep telling your people produce, because they're going to take the shortcuts at the cost of the security. The other thing we tell people, whether it's a letter, phone call, email, text message, real simple, because we used to say, watch out for these red flags or these warnings or these things. Bad guys modify. So instead of 5 things, now there's only 2. And then people are like, geez, I don't know how to respond to this because, that's there, but this isn't there. Forget all of that. Validate or eliminate. It really is just that simple. A letter, phone call, email, text message. If you can't validate the sender, confirm that that sender is the one who actually sent it. If you can't confirm that the information within that message is true, eliminate it, delete it, get rid of it. If it's that important, they're going to find another way to contact you. So if it looks like you're getting an email from HR, pick up the phone and call HR. Hey, just want to make sure, you did this, or send them a separate email and go, hey, I just got an email from you about this. Just want to make sure it was from you.
Yeah.
If you get a text message, same thing. If it's regarding an online account, forget the text message or the email or the phone call, log into your account and see if what they're saying is true. So validate or eliminate. That's all you have to remember. You don't have to remember, look for this, look for this, look for this. Validate or eliminate every single time, and taking the time to be able to do it and developing that privacy mindset. That's going to go far, as opposed to, the current of, oh, we're going to fish test you today. And then if you fail, you got to take more testing. And then if you fail even worse, you might get fired. That just creates this fear, employment shame environment that nobody thrives in.
No, very often we see that's where a lot of junk comes in. Email from Microsoft, they're telling you do this, but when you look at the actual email, it's some sort of other domain or something, right? That's a way of verifying. Take a look at that, where's the email coming from. Don't just go by the header.
Right.
Very often we see mistakes, Kerry, is we all run a businesses. Nobody has enough time to go through every checks and balances. Definitely we can educate our staff. We can work with the customers, but we buy tons of software to run our businesses, and these are third-party software, and you cannot control that, how these people run their businesses, how they run their operations. When the third-party softwares, as you mentioned, one of the example, if they get jeopardized, if they get attacked, that also put me in a risk as a business owner, that now, I was using a software, I assumed it was all secure, but they didn't have a right operations, that they get hacked. Now I'm also, exposed as a risk to that. How do business go about it? How do business leaders approach that? What would you say, what's the right step to, protect some of those things?
Yeah, so that's where it goes back to having the leadership have that baseline knowledge of understanding how the technology works. Because when you're evaluating these third-party software apps, whatever it is that you're using, you're going to be able to ask the right questions. And ask questions. Don't just download, hey, it's a free one, we're all going to use it. Sometimes, free is not secure. So watch out for that. Because at the end of the day, like with this industry that had the ransomware, the third-party software was not whose name was in the news. It was the companies who were jeopardized because of that third-party software. So the buck stops with you. You can outsource all this third-party stuff. And this is something that I think a lot of leadership, they don't understand. They think, well, if we outsource it, it's now their responsibility, not ours.
Especially with the cloud. Just because I have everything in the cloud, I don't have to worry about.
Yeah. Where's the cloud? Do you know where the cloud is? And people, when you ask them that, they're like, I don't know. It's up there somewhere, And that's another thing too. When you're looking to use this, where's the cloud? Basically, it's a room full of servers where your information's being stored or pushed through.
Yeah.
Where are their servers located?
Just because I cannot touch and feel, I know it's secure somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they said they have military grade encryption. It's the biggest marketing gimmick I've seen.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist. Yeah. But again, these are things that as leaders, you need to know. And if you don't understand it, see if there's someone on your team who does. And it might be someone who's not even in that department. It's just maybe they have an understanding of how that technology works. So just ask, just say, hey, here's something we're looking at. Anyone familiar with this technology or with this app or this company, whatever? Get feedback, have them explain it to you, and then make your list of questions, and also look at what are you going to be doing on there. If it's going to be stuff that's not sensitive, not private, not secured, then you don't have to worry about it as much. Just make sure that it's not going to be so tied in or integrated with your operations that if that goes down, it's going to cause your whole operations to go down. So if you're doing something that's kind of not sensitive, not secured, then maybe just keep it as separated as can, because this whole connected environment. Yeah. And the other thing, this is a little bit off topic, but not really. This whole build in public. This is a huge problem, because when you're putting all over your website, here's all the tools that we're using. Now the bad guys know how to hack you, because they look at which one's the most vulnerable and they go in through that back door. You don't need to put that out there. Or when these companies put on there, hey, here's a new company we're partnering with, and they're going to be handling all of our finances or all of our HR or all of our. Why? You're just creating a roadmap for the bad guys. So stop this whole build in public concept. I think it was masterminded by the criminals to make it easier. Be like, hey, here's a way we can get a roadmap, but just make it for us. But again, if you're going to be using this software, look at it. You want to make sure, look at the reviews, do an internet search for the name of it, see if they've ever had a data breach, see if there's been any lawsuits against them, look into who their leadership is, see what other companies, did they just come from one that totally went under and then the venture capitalists lost all their money, or did they have a huge lawsuit? Look at these things, because who you work with is going to be a direct impact on you and your company.
Yeah. There's so many items to take a look. Definitely what you mentioned, a lot of them, business owner definitely need to, start with educating yourself. I think you just have to pay attention. There's too many moving parts in this business. Training is one thing, Kerry. We talk about many different areas. You think the compliance in industry, that there's so many compliance out there, that privacy compliance, security compliance. Do you think compliance is the answer? Definitely it's not going to replace your training people, educating everybody. But do you think compliance is one of the solutions that company leaders look to tighten some of their security items in the business?
So compliance is not the answer. Compliance is the start.
Okay.
Because usually when you look at the compliance standards, that's the bare minimums of what you should be doing. That's the bare minimums. You need to at least start there. You need to have that in place, and then look at what you can do above and beyond that to protect yourselves. Because quite honestly, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here telling this to you, but if businesses did everything that they needed to do to protect what they should protect, they wouldn't be able to do anything. We'd be back at paper and pencil. Yeah. Because, when you're dealing with technology, ones and zeros, and on the internet, you can't protect everything 100%. It's impossible. So you need to have as many barriers in place, as many layers. You need to have, as many tools available that's constantly monitoring, looking around, looking for things unusual. That's why I said you have the tech to fight the tech, and then you need to prepare the humans to fight, the hacking of the human side. But yeah, I think the compliance, I think it is definitely, you need to do that. But sometimes business leaders say, okay, well, we did compliance, so we're good, we're all secure now. That's not always the case. And you also need to look at what works for another company in your industry might not work for you, because you're different. Every organization is different. Every industry is different. So you really need to customize it. Start with the baseline of compliance and then adjust upward from there as necessary to protect your organization.
Very interesting. So much work ahead of our business leaders. But one last one before I want to get into definitely your journey a little bit, how you get to this. Business leaders are always thinking about, hey, cost of doing a business, right? There's a cost of protecting, the cost of technology to protect themselves, but there's also cost of not protecting other side as well, right? And which is many times higher than you protecting yourself, right? Yes. Do you see those discussions? Business leaders always thinking about, hey, there's a cost of me running a business and the cost of me adding more privacy and protection to my business as well.
Yes. The way that I view it is it's almost like insurance. You buy insurance for your business to protect in case that there's a risk. That's kind of what cybersecurity is. It's not an expense. It's you're defending against future risk. Yeah. And if you wait until after the fact, the expense is going to be exponentially higher. The time is going to be done. You could have loss of productivity because you're going to have downtime because you can't access any of your data or your system as a whole. So, don't just look at the immediate upfront cost. You need to also compare that to, okay, so if we didn't do this and we had an issue, how much is that going to cost us? Yeah. I think if business leadership started looking at it from that approach, they're going to see that the cybersecurity is not as expensive as they think it is. And that's something we've seen when we work with people because, again, they put $250,000 into their infrastructure and now they're having to spend even more money because of an issue that they were not even aware of. And that's why it's also good to have different opinions, get advice from other people because they just had their IT department and again, IT and cybersecurity are not the same thing. Yeah. So let's just get that out there right now. So people, they tend to have like this core group and they depend on, because they don't understand the technology themselves. So they depend on them. Well, you're basing all of your decisions around their knowledge base. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's a whole other space out there. So you need, when you're looking at all this and you're looking at the expense, Get
Yeah.
other opinions, talk to other people within your industry. Hey, what are you guys doing? What kind of, and if you, I know you, sometimes people don't want to talk budget money wise with competitors, whatnot, but talk about the threats because they might see something or they might bring up, oh, well, here's something we're doing. You can be like, oh, we never thought about that.
Yeah.
So don't just focus it on the money, the expense side. You
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure that that money is being spent well and where it is needed. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so crucial. Don't just always try and buy the latest and the greatest and slap on more technology. That's not going to solve anything.
Yeah.
You need to identify where your risks are. You need to identify what information do you own and what requirements are to protect it. And you need to evaluate all this first before you start spending money. You
Mm-hmm.
also need to look at how operations are done. What are procedures? This is where you need to get buy-in and you need to get feedback from the entire team because how this department operates and how this department operates can be completely different.
Yeah.
So you need to look at all these things. That way, when you do spend the money, you're spending it wisely and it's being effective as opposed to, oh, let's just get the standard plan and slap it on for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work because people are going to be like, yeah, no, that doesn't work with the way, our procedures are. So we're just going to bypass that. And then that
Mm-hmm.
leads to a whole world of problems. So it's more than just looking at the dollar and just saying, here's what compliance says we have to do. You got to
Mm-hmm.
dig a little deeper. Sometimes it might cost you more. Sometimes it might cost you less, but it's still going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to deal with a problem after the fact.
Yeah. No, they're definitely, this is, one person doesn't have all the answer. That's why you need to, have a collaborative approach to it. There's so many blind spots when it comes to process, what you just mentioned. That's where we need people like you that, we can, as a business owners, we can't see all the blind spots. You need experts who do this on a daily basis and get their opinion and cover all the blind spots that you probably won't be able to see. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your journey. How did you get involved in this, and how did you get so good at this, the privacy side of things? What do you specialize in this? How was your journey?
So how I started years ago. So my company is actually a licensed private investigation agency. We've been in Naples, Florida since 2001. And about 2006, we started getting calls from identity theft victims, consumers. And there weren't many resources out there available to help them at the time. There were starting to be some things online, but it was so confusing that people didn't understand what they were supposed to do. A lot of the laws were changing, so there's a lot of confusion. So we said, okay, we'll help you through this. It's new for us too, but if you're willing to work with us, we'll help you through it. And then word of mouth spread from there. Somebody else became a victim. Oh, I worked with this company, go to them. And then it just grew from there. So now all we don't do the traditional investigative work now. It's just mainly around identity theft. And then we started getting more calls on the fraud side because identity theft and fraud, usually they use fraud to then commit identity theft.
Mm-hmm.
And then with technology, now we've got the whole cyber threat side that's being incorporated into everything. One of the biggest things we're seeing of how people are becoming victims is through remote access software.
Mm-hmm.
It's created for good, used in the IT industry to remotely, work on if Bob's printer is not working, you remote in and you can fix it.
It's convenience, right? You
Exactly.
don't have to drive. You don't have to drive. You can just log in.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for that convenient, that C word, that'll get you. But so the bad guys are using it for evil.
Mm-hmm.
And they're tricking people into installing it onto their computer. And sometimes they'll call, pretend to be from the bank. And we're even seeing on the business side too. But more on the consumer side, they'll call, pretend to be from your bank and say, hey, there's a wire transfer. Did you do this? No, that wasn't me. Oh, okay. Well, it looks like it's coming from your IP address, the one you always log in when you log into your account. Are you having any computer issues? Well, I don't think so. Well, what we can do, we can transfer you over to our tech department and they'll take a look at your computer free of charge. We're not going to charge anything. We just want to make sure you're protected, so we're protected too. Oh, okay, that'll be great. They move you over there, you install the remote access software, you give them the code, and then you see the mouse moving, and they do this whole dog and pony show. Looks like they're checking your computer. Oh, yeah, we found viruses. And then at the end of the call, they're like, okay, everything's clean. Your account should be secured again. If you have any more problems, give us a call. No point in time did they ask for sensitive information. Did they ask for bank or financial information? You didn't have to pay for anything. So remember we talked about all those red flags in the past? Mm-hmm. None of them are in these phone calls. So people walk away thinking it was their bank. Meanwhile, the remote access software is still on their device. Yeah. It's not unusual for when we get involved, we find out that remote access software has been on their device for 6 months. And during that time frame, the bad guy's gone into their account and they're like, yeah, I keep changing my passwords, but they keep getting in because they're going in through your computer. So when you change it, and if you're storing and if you're storing your passwords in your browser, which is a big no-no, if you're doing that, stop it immediately. It just allows the bad guys to get right in. So, kind of, again, getting back to my journey, the more we work with victims, we would try to figure out how it happened. And it would just open our eyes to, oh my gosh, we didn't even know about this, or we didn't know this could possibly happen. So then started, I wanted to start educating my community because, again, I was saying if people would have known one or two things, they never would have been a victim in the first place. So I started doing speaking, and I'll never forget the first group I reached out to was a local nonprofit. They'll remain nameless. And I said, look, I'd love to come out and talk to, your organization about how to protect themselves. And the woman said to me, identity theft, that doesn't happen here. We don't care about that. That was in 2007. So I was like, okay, I have a long journey. And so since then, it turned into the 2 books and the speaking and the training and everything else. And like I said, just from all the years of doing this, when you strip it all down, whether it's a corporate data breach or we're working with a business with identity theft or whatever the case might be, you strip it all down and it goes back to their cognitive cyber beliefs is what made them respond the way that they did. Wow. So if you address that and get people to think, and you're always going to have some of that, but like we had another gentleman where he thought, if I don't do anything online with my bank accounts, I'll be protected because then they can't hack me. That wasn't true. He ended up losing $250,000 over a 6-month period because since he didn't set up the online account, the bad guy called his bank and pretended to be him and said, can you set up online access? And the bank said, sure, we'll send you a link via an email. Just click it and set up the account. And that's exactly what they did. Then they linked his bank account to an American Express gift card, not a credit card, a gift card. So this shows nothing on credit monitoring, will not detect it because it's not a credit transaction. Yeah. And over 6 months, they slowly were moving money. And when he looked at his bank statement, it said American Express. And he just thought that was sounded normal for, what was being paid to American Express. Didn't think anything of it until it was $30,000 that was coming out at a time. So again, it's getting back to that belief. We had another couple, they lost $500,000 in 30 days. Wow. And the remote access software scam. And if they would have just taken that privacy pause, and if they wouldn't have been, because they were embarrassed, they didn't want to tell anybody. And in the beginning, they were afraid to ask somebody else when they got the initial call, especially when they thought it was their bank calling them. They knew something seemed a little off, but they didn't want to have to call their bank back because they thought that they would make them look dumb. Like, no, look dumb. I don't care. Call your bank, and because you're not. And that's the thing that, again, getting over a lot of this, we need to have this open line of communication. If you don't understand something, ask. Have somebody teach it to you. Have somebody show it to you. Admit what you don't know. And if you screw up, which you will, everybody will, we all do it, we're human, then say, oh, I screwed up. So now what do I do? How do I fix it?
How do I fix it? Yeah. Those are very interesting story, definitely, life-changing story for some people, right? But I think your work's cut out for you. There's a lot of work needs to be done in this area. But because we run a technology business, I see very often. Just a couple of weeks ago, I shared a small example with you as well. Top of the line, top prestigious law firm. 150 lawyers. I was invited into their the discussion. They're on I believe they're on a 35th floor in a building. To go up, you need so many different levels of checks, right? So you need to get a pass first. They need to call, somebody to give you access code. You need to punch in an elevator where the access code is, and then when you go in the door, you have to punch another code. So there's so many checks and balances to get to their front door. But when you get inside, Wi-Fi is all open, and you can simply browse to all the files are all open, right? So I just blown away. Listen, I've gone through so many checks to come to your company, but I don't want to have to come to your company. I just have a Wi-Fi outside in the parking lot. I can steal the files. So definitely so many examples like that. I think what you just mentioned, that these are life-changing, business-changing examples. People just need to educate themselves and protect themselves. I'll speak to somebody like you. There's so many blind spot and talk to somebody like you and protect all the risks they have.
Yeah, and let's strip it all down, keep it simple, get back to basics. I don't know why everyone needs to overcomplicate things and use all this jargon and talk about high level stuff. Strip it all down, make it all simple, make it easy for people to understand or remember, because that's how you're going to benefit yourself and your organization. Because if you keep it complicated because you think it sounds formal and fancy, well, nobody's going to understand it and you're going to keep repeating the same vicious cycle. So let's go back to basics.
Yeah.
Let's go back to basics.
Very interesting. Where can people find this book, Kerry? Very interesting book. I will recommend all business leaders to get a copy of the book. There's a lot of techniques in there. There's a lot of information. Just go through a book. You educate yourself, and definitely, I find so much value from our discussion. I expect, I hope that business leaders who are watching, they find a lot of value and they reach out to you for conversation. Right? So have a conversation, have a discussion with you, and educate yourself, as you mentioned that, and use help. There's so much help available out there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And if people want to learn more, they can just go to my website, which is carriekerskie.com. That's CarrieKerskie.com. And the book's available there or on Amazon. And then also don't forget, check out the podcast, which is privacymentor.com, where we try to bring 20 minutes or less, just real quick tips about what is the threat, how will it impact you, and what can you do to protect yourself. Keep it short, sweet, and simple.
Beautiful. I'm definitely going to put all those links below the video as well. They can click a button and connect with you. I'll definitely encourage business leaders to, hey, there's so much value. People like you, there's so many blind spots. We're running a business on a daily basis. We're not going to see everything. And your staff, definitely they understand your business, but they got a work cut out for them as well, right? So you need somebody from outside to come inside and take a look at that, how much risk you're carrying and maybe find a way to how to manage those risks.
Absolutely. And like I said before, you and I, we need both of our sides. You need the tech side, and then you need to address the human side. So if you address things from both of those sides, that's going to be the perfect marriage.
Mm-hmm. Any word of wisdom for business leaders who are just coming out of pandemic? They're simply trying to scale their businesses back in. They're trying to grow companies again. They need to get back. Definitely they need to educate people, and at the same time they have to grow their companies. Any word of wisdom that you want to share with them that something they need to care for?
Open the lines of communication. That's really the biggest thing. If you have a team, talk to them and just say, what are some concerns that you have? What are some things that you're seeing? And start letting them know that they have the freedom to admit what they don't understand. They have the freedom to admit if they make a mistake. They have the freedom to ask for help when necessary. Mm-hmm. Opening that line of communication is going to make a world of difference in how your organization functions, because you might identify areas that are not even on your radar that could be the difference between failure and success. So open the line of communication with everyone on your team.
And this varies from industry to industry, right? Somebody in a law firm may have a different risk. Somebody in an insurance company have a different risk. Somebody in manufacturing may have a different risk. So that's why it's so important that you talk to people who are expert on this area and get their feedback.
Yes, definitely. Yep. Communication is key, and be open. And again, admit what you don't know and take the time to understand it.
Beautiful. Well, I learned so much from our discussion, and hopefully people find a great value in it. So thank you so much for your time, Kerry. I just want to appreciate the time that you spent. Very generous with your time. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed being on. We'll have to have you on my podcast next.
Will do. Thank you. Hi there. Thank you so much for investing time with us and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. For next episode, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and send your feedback. Until next time, have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.